Pull up a chair and buckle up. It's the Original Strength BodCast. Hey guys, thanks so much for tuning in to this week's edition of the Original Strength BodCast. Got a very awesome and special guest this week. Dr. Ray McClanahan, the inventor of Correct Toes, is joining us today. Dr. Ray, thanks for being on the show with us.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me, Tim.
So I've got it may be a simple question and it may be complex, but can you tell us what the importance of foot health is what that means for the body?
Wow. Yeah. It's kind of all encompassing. When I first studied podiatry, I sort of considered maybe the foot was just related to the foot. And if we could get feet healthy, it was only about foot health. But I've since learned in all of my years of practice that your body can't be healthy if your feet aren't healthy. And, we could rabbit trail into different conditions like diabetes, where, it could be life-threatening if your feet aren't healthy. So it's really fascinating when people's feet start to bother them. You've probably heard the old adage, when your feet hurt, you hurt all over. And I literally had two conversations just like that today with people whose feet hurt and now they start limping. And next thing you know, their hip hurts or their knee hurts. So I think foot health is grossly underappreciated in America. And I think there's a couple of reasons for that, Tim. What I've noticed in my work is since so many of the body's bones and joints are in our feet, we can change our feet by putting a shoe with a heel on. We can change our toes by putting a shoe that squeezes our toes. We can put arch supports in that tilt our feet. But our brain is so smart, it will meaningfully move us forward, even if we're not holding our feet in natural positions. But at a certain point in most people's lives, it catches up to them. But it's usually not young people unless they're an athlete. And so that's what's kind of fascinating about footwear. Our feet will let us beat them up with bad footwear for decades and not report pain, usually, or not long-lasting pain. But at a certain point, usually, and it's usually a fourth or fifth decade female in my practice. She didn't traumatize herself. She doesn't have a hereditary issue. She didn't overuse it. Just all of a sudden, one foot won't work. And she'll ask me why. And typically it's her foot has stopped adapting to all the harm that she's done to it. And this isn't just fashion high-heeled shoes, which a lot of people think you only get foot problems if you wear high heels. You can wear shoes that are matched for your size, that are for athletics, that are bad for your feet. And this is something that the public, I don't think completely understands until they do finally break down. And unfortunately, many times when they break down, they might not get a footwear education. They might get treatment for their painful foot. So feet are critical, and what we put on our feet might even be more critical. And this is education we need to get to young people, because the foot problems that I see start early in life. They start age 3 or 4. I see little children that have crooked toes, and mom and dad don't know it has anything to do with their shoes. These parents are being told to have an operation for their child when all their child needs is to get shoes that are shaped like a natural human foot. But it's brand new information for most people, Tim. When I meet with a new patient, as I just did a few moments ago, I always show baby footprints. I show my daughter's footprints at birth, because that's about the only opportunity an adult American will have to see what a natural foot shape is like, unless they happen to live abroad. I lived in Liberia, West Africa for a time, and those people don't have shoes, so their feet still look like a baby's foot. Interestingly, in America, we make shoes for babies shaped like a natural foot, widest at the tips of the toes. So if you came to visit us, I also show my baby shoe. But at about age 2 or 3 in America, we start fitting little children in miniature versions of adult shoes, which have 4 or 5 characteristic features that are not healthy for anybody at any time. But as I shared a moment ago, our feet and bodies will allow us to deform them for many years before we start to develop any chronic problems. And furthermore, there are an awful lot of people that even if their shoes are hurting them, they're still going to wear them anyway, because fashion is a huge value to them, which I think is probably why it's not surprising that about 70% of podiatry patients are females. Men I don't think we're quite as fashion oriented, and what we have available to us in the marketplace is somewhat healthier um, than what the females have to offer them.
So if the foot is not allowed to do what it's naturally designed to do, then it can cause issues in the knee or the hip or the back or the shoulders or anywhere in the body, I guess.
Absolutely.
And so you said, so we teach a movement system called original strength, and our goal is to help people remember how they were designed to move.
Mm.
And so you mentioned that the natural human foot has it's designed where it's wider at the top. But so I'm thinking, as soon as you said that, I'm thinking, well, cowboy boots and running track shoes and or high heeled, like everything squeezes your toes together. So that's what's causing most of our issues in the foot then?
That's a big one. That's a real big one. The other things that are causing issues are the elevated heel. And I don't even mean a stiletto fashion high heel. I mean men's athletic shoes with a 1-inch heel or women's dress shoes with a 2-inch heel. Um, Certainly the pinching is a bad thing. We call that tapering of the toe box. The heel elevation is bad, but there's also a feature built into shoes where the front of the shoe goes up. So if you look at the running shoe on the running shoe wall, um, if a person goes and exercises in a shoe that holds their toes like that, their toes are going to be up in the air instead of on the ground surface, helping the arch. So elevated heel is a negative, a tapered, a pointed toe box is a negative. Literally, the toe box should get wider from the ball. So here's where, for your audience members, they're probably not going to want to go to the shoe store and stand on that metal measuring device that you see, organic device. Another piece of new information that I share with people every day is that device was designed for fashion shoes, but we fit people in athletic shoes with that same device.
Right.
Mostly because the people that build athletic shoes build them for fashion. And this is another huge, I see a lot of our Nike professional athletes and Nike Olympians because Beaverton, Oregon is right close to my practice. But when I tell the athletes that their footwear is not good for them and not natural, they can't wrap their brain around why they're sponsored by one of these huge companies, but their shoes are not healthy for them. So then I also have the benefit of speaking to the designers of these companies, and they tell me that if they make shoes shaped like natural human feet, humans won't buy them. And there's an element of truth there. There is a cultural aversion to the look of our natural feet. And furthermore, a cultural aversion to footwear that looks the shape of our natural feet. So not only is the education that we'll talk about today brand new for most people, even sixth decade Americans don't know that feet should be widest at the tips of the toes. So that's new information. The fact that athletic footwear is built on fashion features is new information because the public generally thinks these shoe companies are making performance athletic footwear, when in reality, they're making footwear that looks good or follows the fashion trends that we've been using for 400 years to build shoes.
So when you introduce this to the athletes, you said that they have a hard time wrapping their head around it. Do you win them over? Like, is it hard to convince them to give it a try to go for a wider toe box or to change how they wear shoes, or how does that work?
Well, I primarily see athletes, and I primarily see runners, walkers, and hikers, and usually they're in discomfort or they can't do their sport. So so they've got a motivating factor there that's different from just the general public. But I've also learned over the years that we need to screen our patients, because for too many years, a young woman would come in, for instance, and we talk through all of this. And since it's a brand new conversation, it's an hour long. And at the end of the conversation, when inevitably we pull out the shoes that meet these standards, a lot of these younger women would look at me and they would say, it doesn't matter how much pain I'm in, I would never wear a shoe like that.
Oh.
So we've learned to screen people. One of our screening questions is, are you willing to change your footwear? Because I specialize in a brand of sports medicine that's natural. It's not what I was trained to do. And what I've seen be successful for people keeps me doing this kind of work but I realize if somebody's not willing to change their footwear, I can't help them with my skill set. I can rely on my old skill set of making custom orthotics and doing operations and prescribing medicine and giving injections, and I still do some of that. But the answer to your question, Tim, is the way they are won over is by introducing them to how good their body functions when they do this. So conceptually, they'll listen and it might be intriguing to them, but once they feel how their body moves, none of them come back and say, can I wear my fashion athletic shoes anymore? Unless they're going to go look fashionable. You know, they don't exercise in it anymore. A fascinating thing happens that we also talk about every single day here at the clinic, which is we have the conversation, we come up with a plan of rehab and spreading people's toes and doing some strengthening and some stretching and so forth. We dispense correct toes, which we'll talk about. We dispense footwear that's appropriate for that. And then we'll see them for a follow-up at some point down the road to see how they're doing. And because this is natural and because we're not arguing with their natural anatomy, most of them are getting better. And so we'll check in, we'll make sure they're getting better. We'll make sure that their training is going well. And then inevitably a large percentage of them will say, you know, something happened that I'm curious about. They'll say, I feel better, that I'm grateful I can do my sport now, but I can't wear my old shoes. And this is a universal thing. This happens with nearly everybody. And then the next question that they ask me is, how come I used to be able to go run 10 miles in that shoe and now I can't even put it on my foot? Or how come I used to go to work in a Danceco clog or some shoe that I thought was healthy, and now that my feet are truly healthy, I can't wear them for more than a couple of minutes? I think we do something bad to children when they're age 2 or 3, when they're not fully developed. We take away their sensory input. We blunt it, we overcushion their shoes, we malposition their feet. So I think the information that they're receiving since their developmental years is not what it should be. So then later on as an adult, we introduce them to how well their body can function if we don't argue with nature. And that's the way I answer that question. We allowed you to have sensory awareness and your brain wants that. And so your brain is going to defend that, meaning you take your old shoe out of the closet and it's going to hurt, and it does. And so at that point, the second or the third layer of that conversation is some of them are going to continue to wear that shoe for a wedding, maybe, you know, for 2 or 3 hours, once or twice every couple of months. The other group says, I'm not even willing to do that for a couple of hours. I care way more about my body, and I know the path to healing, and I'm going to stay on it.
That's awesome. So I guess I know the answer to this, but everybody might not. I believe that the body's designed to heal and repair itself. So if a person spends, and I know that it does. And I just want to hear you say, if a person spends 50 or 60 years with their toes squished together, is it possible for them to restore their feet?
Most of the time, with one exception.
Okay.
And the way we confirm this, and we're going to publish this data because a lot of people in the podiatry and the orthopedic community would tell you and I that what I'm about to describe is not possible. Mostly because they've not seen it. I think it's not what we're taught. It's not in the medical textbooks yet. But at the first visit, we take a picture of everybody standing in their bare feet on top of the sock liners that come out of their footwear. So you're familiar, if you buy a walking shoe, a running shoe, a hiking boot, it's going to have that little piece of foam you can pull out. Mm-hmm. So rather than going by the number and letter system of the metal measuring device, we have people pull that sock liner, also known as a shoe liner, out and stand on it. So we take a picture of them standing on their shoe liner for 2 purposes: to document the first day of their treatment, where they're at, what their foot health is like, and what their toe shape is like. Do they have bunions? Do they have hammer toes? Is their 5th toe curled in under their 4th toe like mine was? Is their 2nd toe sitting on top of a bunion like mine was on both of my feet? So we've got a baseline. We know what they're like at day one. We also have confirmed with these photographs we've been taking for about 12 years that 90% of the athletes that come into see our clinic have footwear that's narrower than their feet. So they're all getting squeezed. Their toes are all getting squeezed narrower than the ball. So then we see them, if they're in pain, we see them until they're out of pain. If they're not in pain, we'll see them at a year interval or a 2-year interval to check back in with them, but mostly to confirm with them that they're getting better photographically. Because this is very much like braces for your teeth. Now, my daughters both just had their braces removed, but they had them on for 18 months. And we moved their teeth. We moved the jawbone and we moved enamel through progressively applied forces. So we do that all day, every day in the clinic. And it's the most gratifying work, especially when you get somebody out of pain, but you also show them that their body is healing. And you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. It can heal. But the one exception that I do see and concerns me, and the reason why I'm so passionate about this education, is I will occasionally meet somebody who pinched their toes together for too long or malpositioned their foot in some way for so long that they developed an arthritic joint that no longer has any flexibility. This does not work in those people. This would be a waste of their time and money. So we do basic screening tests. We try to teach people not only online, but when they come into the clinic, if we can take your big toe and we can move it back into natural alignment, this will work. If you have a hammer toe where the knuckles popped up, if I can take those hammer toes and make them go straight, this will work. If I take that hammer toe and I try to force it down and it's rigid, this won't work. And that person should consider a different type of treatment, maybe even a surgical treatment. So this is why we want to get to people early in their life before they develop these chronic, rigid, fixed contractures, because those people are not candidates for this work. Maybe once they develop the mobility, they can be, and whether or not the mobility comes from an operation or whether it comes from focused work with a body worker. But I would say that arthritis and stiff joints are the one thing that's not going to work with this.
So, but still, would the cause of hammer toes or stiff toes and that arthritis just be because of the shoes that they were wearing?
Most of the time.
Okay.
However, that's also going to be new information for your audience, because if they go to their typical podiatrist or even their orthopedic surgeon, there's a whole host of theories about why people get hammer toes and why people get claw toes and mallet toes and adductovarus toes and bunions. And they're biomechanical theories that basically ignore footwear. So it's assuming that these things are somehow spontaneously happening to these people's feet, which doesn't make sense at all. But what does make sense, and we can have a logical discussion with non-medical people about what happens to your foot when you lift the back of your foot with an elevated heel in comparison to the front of your foot. Your calf muscles get shorter, get 14% shorter.
Wow.
With a 2-inch heel. Yeah. So which one of us, male and female, isn't wearing some form of heel most of the time? We exercise in it. We go to work in it. We go to church in it. So unfortunately, that's a big negative, but almost all the shoes that are built still do that. You can look at the toe spring feature that I talked about, where the ends of the toes go up like this.
Mm-hmm.
That makes the front of our calf muscles get short and tight. You consider the foot comes into the world like this, but then we take a tapering toe box and we push it like this. It's a one-to-one relationship, but unless people see this by you showing them their shoe, showing them the characteristics of their shoe, showing them how they fit their shoe, they're going to believe in these theories, and they're going to believe there's something wrong with their mechanics, and then they're going to put an orthotic into the shoe that's deforming them. And that's not going to cause healing. It's going to cause some change. It might create some symptom reduction, perhaps, but they're going to get weaker and weaker. So yeah, it's really interesting that the things people are taught and the things people are told. And that's another reason why we need to spend a good chunk of time with people, because um, not only are we presenting new information, they are also listening to the voices in their head from their family, their pediatrician, their podiatrist, the running shoe clerk at the shoe store, putting them on the treadmill. This is the amount of pronation, and you need arch support, and you need this kind of a shoe. Many years ago, I actually dug deep into the research on footwear, and we sell a belief system to people that is not based in science, and we've been doing this for decades now. What the research does show is that when we do these things, we do create these deformities and contractures, and we create weakness. But I've heard it said that oftentimes when something changes in medicine or new information is learned, that it could take a long time, maybe a decade or more, for people to actually
Yes.
absorb it. So I'm eager for that to happen. Some of the younger podiatrists are interested in this. Um, my podiatric residents that circulate through my clinic come away with all of this. And so in my estimation, they've got the best of both worlds. They've learned the surgical side, they know how to make orthotics, they know what the medications can do, because people need those things. But whereas I'm trained that most people need those things, I no longer believe that. I think most people need good education, proper footwear, and awareness of how their body works or how their body should function, and then time. And when those elements are covered, very few people need operations or shots or orthotics. I worked for an orthotics lab for 5 years, and everybody got orthotics until I read the work of Dr. William Rossi, Rossi. 4 of his articles are on my website. I might encourage you, Tim, to post those perhaps in the show notes for your
Okay,
audience.
I will do.
In 1999, I had a treadmill in the office. I was operating it a lot, and I was making a lot of orthotics. And I read this article called "Why Shoes Make Normal Gait Impossible" by Dr. Rossi. And I was very interested in gait, and I still am. So I thought, well, this should be interesting. But the article literally changed my mind overnight. I had to do a 180 radical departure from my curriculum that I was taught. But if you or your audience members read it, it's so straightforward, it's so clear, it respects our natural body, it's photographically rich from evidence. He traveled all over the world, and he photographed cultures that don't do the shoes with heels and tapering toe boxes and toe spring, and it's compelling. I lived in Africa. I saw it. I've been to Asia, where I've been in the jungles of Asia, where they either go barefoot or wear flip flops. I've been to South America, and the people that don't wear our shoes don't develop our problems. But in America, we mostly all wear the same kind of shoe, and we mostly all have deformed our feet so early in life that our feet look like each other's, and it's kind of lost on us that there's a problem there. But there's a big problem, and as we talked at the outset of the show, it's not just a foot problem; it's a whole body problem, unfortunately.
That's really interesting because so what we teach is that the human body is designed for the gait pattern, and the gait pattern is what ties us together, keeps us physically strong, but it also keeps our brain healthy because it gets both hemispheres of the brain to communicate with each other, and it just makes the body just move so efficiently. And it is we call it a reset. So it's what keeps our nervous system healthy throughout life so that we can enjoy our life. And that's the gait pattern. But if the gait pattern is not able to do its job well because the foot is compromised, then it's not being everything it's supposed to be for us. Like, so we're really missing a lot with that.
We really are, Tim. We really are, and it's tragic, that many of us go for most of our life, if not all of our lives, not really tapped into our true gait. And I don't think anybody that's reading the literature right now would argue that different shoes cause immediate changes in gait. In fact, physical therapy, a friend of mine and I teach a free class on the waterfront every summer. The very first thing we have people do is run across the concrete pad in their typical big cushioned arch supportive athletic shoes. They come back to the other side of the park. We have them take their shoes off and we have them run again across that. And it's only a little short 50-meter or whatever. But in that moment, nearly everybody, if not everybody, goes from a heel strike to a forefoot strike.
Right.
And I'm not here to project what kind of strike is better because it depends. There's so many variables, as you well know. Footwear is a variable, but so is velocity, so is uphill, downhill. There's so many variables. You can't say one way is better, but we can agree if you're looking at the literature, shoes have a profound effect on gait, and most of the time it's not favorable. In fact, even some of the natural minimal shoes that people wear have also been shown to have some gait parameters that are not ideal. Yeah, so one of the most potent things I think for anybody is to engage their gait in their bare feet from time to time. Not all the time. I saw you had Dr. Mark Cucuzella on as a guest, and
Yes.
what a man, what a champion he is. As you probably well know, he does a considerable amount of running in his bare feet.
Yes.
But I think he would agree that you don't have to be purely barefoot to reap a lot of these rewards. But what he believes is what I believe is if you go walk and run in your bare feet, you're going to get the cleanest, most, I don't really even know the right adjective, the best information, best proprioceptive information about your gait pattern. And then even when you put on shoes, I think you've learned something, so it's almost like you're maintaining some of those parameters. But yeah, shoes don't do a lot of good for our gait, unfortunately.
So I'm just curious. Have you gotten a lot of pushback from the podiatry world?
Constantly, Tim. Constantly. In fact, there's a debate going on right now with a group that, well, actually, a friend of mine from Portland texted me about a week ago, and he said they're disparaging you over on podiatry management. And I used to be very involved in these listservs, and I don't like arguing. I think arguments are empty, but I like sharing some of these ideas. But podiatry is so deeply entrenched in different kind of thinking that, yeah, I've had podiatrists recommend that I be sued. I've had podiatrists report me to the Federal Trade Commission. I've had podiatrists tell their patients to sue me. But this particular past week, Dr. Emily Splickle from New York posted some of her findings, which are some of my findings from the research that I've looked at and some of the research that we've actually done. When you start going in your bare feet and when you start wearing natural shoes that hold your feet like bare feet, your arch muscles get 10% bigger. I've reviewed 7 studies. They all confirm the same thing. Ultrasound studies, MRI studies. If you do this, you don't have to do anything fancy. You just need to start engaging your feet and they will get 8 to 10% bigger. But that's a very unpopular notion in podiatry for a lot of reasons. I think it's because we were taught something opposite. I also realize that a lot of the treatment paradigm reimbursements are dependent upon following the old paradigm. So I had a nice conversation with one of my sports colleagues about a year ago. Really nice guy. I like the guy a lot. Good friend of mine. But he said to me one day at a seminar, he said, Ray, I like your work and I like Correctos and I can see that it can work. But the particular insurance companies that he's contracted with pay him $1,000 for a pair of orthotics. So he literally said to me, the economics are straightforward, Ray. I can make $32 or I can make $1,000. So I think some of it's educational. Some of it is the hierarchical system that exists in medicine, where you were taught by your predecessors and you trusted them that they knew standard of care and evidence-based medicine, and you followed that. And that's still heavily influencing medicine to this day. So I think part of it's a difficult question to ask if maybe there's a better way of doing it than the way we were trained to do it. It's a difficult position to put yourself in to accept lesser reimbursement. Everybody thinks doctors are rich, and some of them are, but that's not always the case. Some of them are working very hard for their money, so to ask them to work even harder to abandon what is now working for them, plus now they have to teach their patients something brand new when for the last however many years they've been teaching the patients something different, so I think there's many layers of why it's not better embraced in podiatry. But yeah, I get pushback constantly, Tim. And I'm okay with it. I didn't used to be. It used to keep me awake at night. And I used to think that, wow, why aren't my podiatric colleagues as excited about natural health or prevention? And I think there's a lot of reasons for that. Not all of them are athletes. Not all of them look at their job as their passion. Some of it's just their job. Um, but yeah, lots of pushback. But what I've discovered, Tim, thankfully, is I have a community that's not really podiatry. I have a few podiatry friends, but most of my community, my healing team, is naturopathy, chiropractic, athletic training, body workers, yoga people, acupuncturists. None of those people have an obstacle to their way of seeing their patient's path to natural health, because that's their mentality. But I often tell people, including one of the patients today, I think to truly understand podiatry and what's different about podiatric training the way that I practice, podiatry is a branch of allopathic medicine. So imagine you're familiar with that, but I don't know if your audience members are. So allopathic is make the symptom go away, and that's success. So if we cut out your nerve and your symptom goes away, that's success. If we shave off some of your bone and your symptom goes away, that's success. If we medicate you and you can't feel your pain, that's success. But the way I practice now would be more in line with naturopathic thinking, which is nothing wrong with treating somebody, nothing wrong with taking away pain, but we should also be looking at, they call it tolli causum, the Latin for find the cause.
Mm.
What's the root cause? Why is this person in my office with a painful bunion? Why does this person have crooked toes or heel pain or Achilles tendon pain? So yeah, it's a different way of looking at medicine, which I'm grateful I've been trained in both, but I would say overwhelmingly I lean much more heavily on naturopathic care, and that's why I'm sought out. Most of my colleagues do it the way we're trained to do it. So I've got a nice niche doing natural care, which I find highly gratifying.
But and I think you deserve. It takes a lot of courage to go against the grain of what the standard or the tradition is. So, and that is awesome. I'm glad people are searching you out.
Thank you.
So I got to ask you this because I saw this on your website and it was just neat. How do you empower your own foot?
Empower it?
Yes. Like I heard that on one of your videos where you were talking about you could empower your own foot. And it just resonated with me. I was like, oh, that's pretty neat.
I'm trying to remember where I was speaking about that way, but I would say the way I would describe empowerment would be current podiatric philosophy is to support. It is to do something to the foot as opposed to empower it. And I don't imagine you would agree with this, but a lot of doctors, especially podiatrists, think that the feet are flawed, that evolutionarily they didn't develop well, or I even heard a podiatrist one day say that the fifth toe is a vestigial organ because we don't use it and it's tucked in under our fourth. Well, the reason why it's tucked in under the fourth is because, and we can't use it because it's dysfunctional. It's not positioned properly. It's got no muscular strength. But the way I empower my own feet and teach people to empower their feet is by strengthening them, not supporting them. I did support them for a long time and I had a lot of back pain. I had a lot of knee pain, and obviously I had a lot of foot pain too because I wore the pointed shoes. I wore them 3 sizes too small. I crammed orthotics in there. I did all the wrong things. I overtrained. I ate the wrong things. I didn't know anything about breathing. I didn't know anything about posture. Didn't know anything about, so many things. Took too many anti-inflammatories. But the way I empower my foot now is I don't argue with nature. So I stand up in my bare feet in front of my patients, and I have them do this with me too. And I ask them to notice how their foot is positioned. Their heel bone will be completely level with all of their toe bones. And then I'll pull a shoe that they're wearing and I'll position my foot like the shoe would position it. And I'll show how it will collapse my foot. And then I'll show them how to do this too. So it's a matter of getting shoes out of the way, because most shoes don't empower our feet. A lot of people believe they do. A lot of people go to the shoe store and listen to the store clerk talking about this proprietary material and this wedging system and this whatever. But I believe in feet. I believe they're masterful and inherently brilliant in their design. And so I no longer believe they're flawed. I believe we do dumb things to them unknowingly most of the time, but we can undo a lot of that. So I go bare feet a lot. I run bare feet. When I'm not bare feet, I'm in a shoe that holds my foot like a bare foot. In other words, and I'm fortunate doing this kind of work. People send me shoes from all over the world, all the new natural stuff coming out. So right now I'm wear testing the Speed Force by Zero shoe.
It's my favorite shoe. I love that shoe.
I only have it for a week and I love it. Oh, it's so awesome. As you've seen, Tim, from your experience, and your audience can see, this is like being bare in my bare foot. I have a little bit of rubber to protect me, but there's no heel, there's no rigid toe spring. The toe box can accommodate my spread toes. So it's essentially as if I'm barefoot, but I'm just getting a little bit of layered protection there, and there's nothing wrong with that. I also do a lot of weird things with my feet. I open doors with my feet. I turn on lights with my feet. I scrub the shower with my feet. Because I've learned and I've discovered, not only from my own feet, but working with other people, our toes are like fingers, but we don't use them.
Right.
You know, but the capability is fantastic. All you need to do is look at a baby and look at the dexterity and look at the position of them too. I mean, that's another huge take home. But essentially, we don't have full function, full capacity because we take it away, you know, with our footwear. But we can get people back to that. It's just a long process, and they have to understand the principles. They have to be willing to wear that kind of shoe. And it's even better if they'll do some of the rehab that we outline. But most of them don't. Most of them, it's including doctors. My last patient of the day today is a doctor, and she just told me I haven't been doing my exercises, you know. So it's common, you know, to not follow through on all those little pieces. But I think getting back to your original question, going barefoot, wearing shoes that are like barefoot, using our feet to do all kinds of things. I pick up hacky sacks. I pick up golf balls. I can throw a ball with my foot. So just basically waking our feet up can introduce people to the wonderful capacity that they have. And then once they feel all that, they're not going to want to go back to what they were doing before. It's a universal, unless they're going to dress up.
Right.
And they know it's not for health. They now then know I'm trying to impress somebody with my outfit or trying to fit in at the wedding or whatever. So it's highly possible to empower our feet, but we have to believe that they're capable first, you know, and that's the obstacle for some people. It's easy to get talked into supporting them when you're told that something wrong with the structure of them, you know, or they didn't develop well, or evolutionarily they're flawed. I don't believe in any of that. I really think that they're masterful.
That was a life-changing answer. Thank you very much. That was powerful. So for the big question, what are correct toes?
Yeah.
And what do they do?
So they're a silicone device that basically take a deformed adult foot or deformed child's foot and put it back into natural alignment. So the analogy that everybody understands is Invisalign for our mouth.
Oh, yeah.
It's soft plastic or silicone, but it changes people's teeth. What we're doing with correct toes is we are moving bones, but we're actually moving the insertion of muscles onto the bones. But the backstory on that, Tim, is I was doing about 10 bunion operations a week at the hospital, and I had one on both of my feet. So my second toe sat on top of both of my big toes. And I was convinced it ran in my family and I couldn't do anything other than wear orthotics and eventually have an operation. But about 10 times a week, we're doing this operation on somebody, and a component of the operation is to cut one of the muscles off of the big toe. adductor hallucis muscle. It's the one that pulls your big toe towards your second toe.
Right.
It's a two-headed muscle. It's supposed to be balanced out by a muscle that starts on the inside of your heel and goes to the big toe. But we wear these pointed shoes, so it gets short and tight and it develops a trigger point. But essentially, after 2 years of doing all these operations, I had a bad feeling, an intuition, if you will, that I didn't want to have that operation. Mostly because I'm addicted to running, and they don't always work. In fact, Dr. Kukazela had one on both of his feet, and I don't think you guys got into a lot of his history, but essentially I decided I didn't want to have the operation. I read Dr. Rossi's first paper that I alluded to, Why Shoes Make Normal Gait Impossible. And I had a patient in the nursing home one night. And I don't remember what I was seeing her for, but one of my physical therapy buddies was there for a different patient. His patient had fallen and broken her hip and laid on the gurney for a long enough time where her upper body started getting stiff, contracted. So I watched him warm her up and put her through ranges of motion over the course of, I don't remember how long it was, weeks, maybe months, and got most of her mobility back. And I had this idea that I've since confirmed is possible. There's no other part of the body that's different from the foot in terms of its rehabilitative capacity. So in other words, if your shoulder gets stiff, we can get range of motion back. So I decided to try to apply these principles to feet, specifically mine starting out with. And I had this idea in my mind that maybe I don't need to cut my adductor hallucis and cut through my bone and put a screw in there, take painkillers, be off of my running for however long. So I started buying these little single silicone spacers. You can see them at the drugstore. Started putting them between my first toe and second toe, between my fourth and fifth toe. My toes started getting straight. My body started feeling better. So then I started putting them in between all of my toes. But they wouldn't stay in place when I ran. As soon as I started sweating, they'd move all over the place. But nevertheless, I started telling the patients about it and they were interested. Well, I got together with the designer buddy of mine one day and I said, we need to put 4 of these in one piece and we need to make it adjustable because people's feet are all over the board. You've got tall men with short, skinny feet. You've got short women with, big, huge feet. It's all across the board. So we also made it customizable so we can add extra material into these little cavities to further splay the foot out. So I got the patients going on it. And the big obstacle for us, Tim, was we didn't have proper footwear. So this was 20 years ago. So what we had was Birkenstocks and Crocs. I've got a sports medicine practice, so I know you can sense where I'm going with this. So I said, yeah, I know it looks ridiculous and these shoes are not made for running, but I think it's going to work. And I ran my best marathon in a pair of Crocs.
That's amazing.
It was. It blew my mind. But what really blew my mind, Tim, was I felt good enough to run the next day. And that's something I'd never done post-marathon. But so we got the designer together. We made a bunch of prototypes. All of our prototypes were wrong. I had this idea that we should evenly space all of the toes. So I actually ruptured the collateral ligament on my 4th toe of my left foot.
Oh.
Yeah, still ruptured. It's painless. It doesn't hurt me, but I made a big mistake. I overspread my toes. So then multiple prototype changes, multiple material changes. We came up with what we feel is a good durometer, a good softness of the material. And early on, I saw these results were remarkable and I was not taking people to surgery as much. So I thought, wow, my colleagues are just going to think this is amazing. So I got on the listservs that I used to belong to and I said, you guys are not going to believe this. I'm reversing bunions and hammer toes. And would any of you guys like to try a sample of this? And I was not sophisticated back then. I was shoving him in a sandwich bag with a little type note. Go slowly and gradually. Don't wear these in your pointed shoes. Very few podiatrists were interested, and the ones that were and sent them samples didn't want to change their shoes or couldn't figure out why they wouldn't go in the existing shoes and so forth. So for probably a decade, Tim, I tried to influence podiatry. And you can find all my responses out there on the interwebs and internet. But I don't think I'm changed very many people's minds at all. It wasn't until 4 years ago that I gave a 20-minute lecture that's on my website. It's also on YouTube called Shape of Strength, where I presented the literature to my sports medicine colleagues. And I literally had one of them come up to me afterwards. And this was probably one of the most gratifying things that anybody ever said to me. He said, Ray, I literally thought that you were crazy recommending barefoot and people in these thin shoes. I really thought something was wrong with you. But once the literature was expressed, and unless something is wrong with you, and you're arguing against proven science, you know. So I found my tribe, and we're international now. But you said at the outset of the show, it's selfish for you because you get to learn a lot. For me, Correct Toes was selfish. I didn't have to have an operation because I selfishly invented something for my foot problem. But fortunately, millions of people have these problems, and billions of dollars literally are spent in America every day or every year for elective foot surgery. The bunions, the hammer toes, the Taylor's bunions. So it's been super awesome to take a slower, natural approach in the right patient population. It's inexpensive. It's natural. I mean, there's so much good about it. The only thing that's not good about it is it's time consuming. So whereas I used to take somebody to the hospital and by, an hour later, their big toe is straight. Now it's more likely to be 3 years. I saw a 64-year-old doctor this afternoon. She every year she's getting better and better, but it's slow. So this is why we want to catch people early in life. I do have a testimonial on the website. It's also on YouTube where I took a 3.5-year-old boy. His toes were like mine were. They were all cattywampus and crooked and overlapping. And I was visiting with mom and dad who had already had a surgical consult. One of my colleagues said, well, we need to open up the boy's toes and we're going to cut out part of the joint. We're going to put pins in there. And this is what's going on. This is going on where you live right now. It's going on where I live right now. And of course, no parent wants their child to go through something non-invasive if there's or invasive if there's a non-invasive method. So as I shared with you, I start my conversation with natural anatomy. This is our default position, even though most people aren't here now. This is how we should be. Then I go about describing how footwear are responsible for a lot of this. And the dad actually interrupted me and he said, what is common belief, that this doesn't have anything to do with my son's shoes. This runs in our family. His uncle has it. His grandpa has it. So here's where I didn't say another word. I reached into the boy's shoe and I pulled out the sock liner, the removable piece. And in mom and dad's presence, I put the child's foot on the sock liner and it was about 3/4 of an inch wider. His foot was wider. And this is common. And then the dad went, oh, because he saw something new. And when his child's foot's in his shoe, he doesn't see his child's foot. So he can't see that his inside of his shoe, he is deformed. So that I love helping anybody and everybody, but 18 months later, one of his feet was cured. And I love using that word, Tim, because it's true. Although that's one of the reasons why I get beat up by other medical providers. They don't want me to say I cured a crooked toe because they don't believe it's possible. They don't want me to say I cured a bunion. But I present photographic evidence. I present radiographic evidence. And I still have podiatrists that tell me I'm selling snake oil. So you can't win them all,
No.
And I think some people's minds are not ever going to be changed. But yeah, it does work, and it's super gratifying. Now we have 4 different sizes of correct toes. They're modifiable. We've got videos on, doesn't matter what kind of foot problem you've got. You can have web toes, you can have short toes, long toes. We probably have a way to make them work for you. And I'm not a salesman, although I love to see the success of them, but they have a money back guarantee as well, Tim, for a month. So most people start feeling a benefit in a couple of days. And the benefits are all kinds of different things. But do you have time for another quick story?
Yeah.
So when I first got excited about it, as I shared, I sent them out to podiatrists that wanted to try them. And I have a local podiatrist here in Portland that considers herself a holistic podiatrist. So I don't know if you have been to the podiatry office, but they're run like a lot of doctors' offices. There's several patients in the clinic at any one time, doctors going room to room to room. And this particular colleague had 3 or 4 rooms going. One lady had a bunion. And when my doctor friend went in to talk to her, she said, I don't want to have that operation. I've seen some really bad results. Do you have anything natural? And I had just sent her correctos. So she pulled it out of the package and she put it on the lady's foot. And she said, I'm going to go take care of this toenail and go give a shot and I'll be right back. So just relax. And I don't remember, 20 or 30 minutes later, and we do this every day in the clinic on every new patient. We talk through it all, but then we examine them, we give them the diagnosis, then we put the correctos on, and then we finish up the conversation, answer their questions, and then I say to them, look at your foot. And then I pull it off, and there's a massive radical change, but as you can imagine, it's not permanent. It's not even barely etched in their memory. So 5 minutes later, their foot is right back to what it was. But we keep adding a little bit more and adding a little bit more and teaching that new habitual position that is the old natural position that the body really actually wants to accommodate. But the point is, it blew her mind that in 20 to 30 minutes, there was a massive change. So it's really fun to see. And I'm especially proud at how many people are avoiding operations. I see people probably weekly who are suing their podiatrist for a bad outcome. And I wish they weren't suing them, but I also wish the operation hadn't occurred, because it probably didn't need to occur. And I only need to see 1 or 2 patients bawling their eyes out because they can't work out or they can't do whatever to really make me passionate about getting this information out to as many people as possible.
That's awesome. And time's not, you said the drawback is time, like it may take up to 3 years. But, and like you said, so as soon as somebody puts on a pair of shoes, it immediately changes their gait. So change happens at the speed of the nervous system, but lasting change does take time because you got to get, the tissues have to get memory in them, they have to heal, but the nervous system also has to have those repetitions in there so that it can maintain that efficiency and that pattern. But the first 3 years of your life, you spent 3 years tying your body together perfectly and becoming resilient. So in the grand scheme of things, what if it does take another 3 years to heal and to have the life you want to have? Great.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
fantastic. This has been wonderful. Thank you so much for spending your time with us today. I've learned a lot, and it's just been so awesome to hear your story and what you're doing. So thank you very much.
You're welcome, Tim. Thank you for having me.
So if somebody wants to learn more about you and to go to read your articles and watch your videos and to get correctos, where can they go?
Yeah, several different places. We've got 2 different websites. One is our clinical website. The other is our Correctos website. I might encourage your audience members to go there. It's correcttoes.com, www.correcttoes.com. Under foot health, we've got a video section. There's also a lot of articles. They could also go to YouTube and just let's pretend one of your audience members right now has a bunion and they're listening and they want to know natural therapy for their bunion. They could go to YouTube, Ray McClanahan bunion. And we've done, I think, 85 different condition videos on most of the common conditions and how you can approach it naturally. And in a lot of the videos, we contrast, or I should say compare and contrast traditional podiatric methodology versus natural healthcare. So those are great places. And these are usually 4 and 5 minute videos so people don't get too bored. And they all start with the cornerstone of the footwear. So for your audience members, I would maybe encourage them to go look at the sock liner test video. That teaches how to fit footwear. Because if there's one thing I want your audience to take away from this, Tim, is I think the most important feature of having healthy feet is having footwear that's natural. In fact, it's so simple. Many times it's just a matter of getting natural footwear and giving it time, giving it that tincture of time. They could also find me. I recently founded a group with a bunch of others, the Healthy Feet Alliance, and we have a community group too, a community Facebook group called the Healthy Foot Alliance, where we're regularly posting material, articles, podcasts, videos, and so forth. And then certainly if anybody's close to Portland, we'd encourage them to come on by, either if they need a visit, or we offer a community service where people want to come by and just have us look at their shoes, fit their shoes, modify their shoes. There's no charge for that. People can additionally come in. We have a shoe store here as well, mostly because I learned 20 years ago that when I had the conversation with a patient that you and I just had today, if I sent them out to the typical running shops, there either wasn't a selection available that was natural, they would get conflicting information. In fact, the local running shop for years told people, don't go to Dr. McClanahan. He's completely wrong. You need to go to these podiatrists over here and get this orthotic. So they could also find me at the Healthy Feet Alliance, and they could join that group. We're growing weekly. We just added Dr. Stephen Bowie, a podiatrist who's awesome, last week. Dr. Mark Kukazel is with us. We've got brilliant minds in this group, and we're gonna change the world. And yes, we're passionate about it.
That's awesome. Dr. Ray, thank you so much. I will put all that in the notes so people will have access to it. And again, thank you. This has been fantastic.
Awesome. Thank you for your time, Tim.
Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Ray McClanahan.
Thanks for listening, everyone. Have a great weekend.